There's been several important reports in the past. Well, this was last month in September. This is the fifth comprehensive report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And a few months before that was a report of the International Energy Agency looking at the energy options that are available to humanity, to the planet, should we so choose. Both are extremely important in underlying something which is a theme of our talks here, which is that we're in the midst of a climate emergency. There's no other word for it. And I won't make the case for that. I think most of you are somewhat read on the subject. But what is perhaps a bit unique to discuss today in our report is how much the governing institutions of this country and the economic elite of this country are going in exactly the opposite direction to what we need to be doing as a society, as a human race. And that's part of the climate emergency that we face, which is that those in power in most countries of the world are not only oblivious to the climate crisis, but in fact are very much the drivers of it. They are the problem, those with the making the economic and political decisions. And these reports and so many other articles by writers such as Naomi Klein and an endless number that I can name here really stress and underline the urgency of all of this. So what does this mean for us in British Columbia and in North America? Well, I want to run through quickly, the big stories on this. These are the fields of natural gas that exist in North America. This is coal in Canada.
What color are the coal generated?
The green squares are the existing coal generation.
Where it is by Prince Rupert, they're blue. What's that one?
Those are the two coal export terminals that exist in Canada. Vancouver is, if not already, going to be the largest coal export terminal in North America. And these are the oil pipelines of Canadian companies. The lighter lines you see here are U.S. oil lines. But these are the lines that are owned by Canadian companies or operated in Canada by U.S. companies. You see the lines stretch into the U.S. You don't see so well, but this is how Alberta oil presently gets to the refineries in Montreal and to export in Portland, Maine, and also to the refineries in Southern Ontario, largely conventional oil at this time. And so I've shown you coal, natural gas, now oil, including the tar sands in North Alberta. Now what's geographically unique about all these? All three are landlocked, so they need something to get them to markets in eastern North America, southern United States, or abroad. And so pipelines or rail is critical to the fossil fuel ambitions of Canada's
and what are the red tracks there?
That's just one of the companies. If you look on the right, you'll see by color are the names of the lines themselves. And this is the big granddaddy that they'd like to build in Canada. This is the proposed Energy East pipeline, which would take we take bitumen, that is the tar sands oil called it, it's bitumen, it's not oil, it's not the same thing, but from Alberta to Montreal and on to, this is the option, on to St. John, New Brunswick, to the big refinery and export terminal, also to Portland, Maine again, if they wanted to expand that. So this is something like a $10 billion project we'd like to do. And then this is the proposed tar sands pipeline. This is an existing pipeline of Enbridge, which comes, it connects to the pipeline network in the U.S., including Enbridge Company, to Alberta. This pipeline presently has been used for decades to bring oil coming into Quebec by ship and bringing it to the refineries that are here and also in Sarnia. So now Enbridge Company wants to reverse the flow so that tar sands bitumen can flow through Southern Ontario, again, to the refineries in Montreal, with the option eventually of shipping it to Portland, possibly to St. John, New Brunswick, because this line, which doesn't exist, this is an existing gas pipeline, but this is the proposed Energy East route that I told you about. So that would be another way of getting tar sands oil to the refineries in Montreal and further east. And so that reversal of Enbridge's line here from, the border, but it's connected to an existing network, all the way up to Montreal, is presently being hotly contested. And this is where this pipeline runs through, right through the middle of Toronto. It's unbelievable. So this is, a pipeline that would carry Alberta bitumen running through schools, workplaces, transit lines, people's backyards, whatever. That's, we'll look at one urban location of this pipeline to show you a similar map for places like Montreal, elsewhere in southern Ontario. It's quite incredible. And there's an uproar over this, of course, in Toronto. And this is part of what it's all about. I talked to you earlier about the St. John, New Brunswick Irving Oil, which is part of the secretive but highly, very powerful Irving family empire, has Canada's largest refinery presently in St. John, New Brunswick. So they're very anxious to get the Energy East pipeline connected to their refinery and also to their export complex in St. John, New Brunswick. Irving has extensive oil interests throughout New England, so big ambitions there as well. So there's a very close and tight relationship between the Conservative government in Ottawa and this family empire, among others, in the oil industry. This is a visit that Stephen Harper made in August of this year. And of course, you're familiar with the contested tar sands pipelines here in British Columbia. The red line you see there is the proposed expansion of Trans Mountain by the U.S. company Kinder Morgan that would carry bitumen, tar sands bitumen from Alberta to Vancouver, Burnaby. And then it's not drawn here, but the proposed Northern Gateway pipeline will go basically directly west to Kitimat up here. And then imagine this oil tank is going through these waters. That's a whole other story that I won't get into here, but that's the tar sands pipeline they would like to have coming to the west coast. And this is the natural gas pipeline network that exists presently in Canada. Again, these are either U.S. or Canadian companies that, with their lines in Canada and that stretch into the U.S. So this existing natural gas pipeline going to Montreal and points east, Portland, Maine here. This is roughly the route of the Energy East oil line. It would use the same right of way if they built the Energy East tar sands pipeline. But again, you see up in the northwest of Alberta and northeast of British Columbia, existing and extensive gas pipeline networks. And the dotted lines here are the pipelines that would be the LNG proposals over which Christy Clark and many business interests dream of every night of realizing that those dotted lines don't yet exist, but those are among the five, actually, I think, well, it could only be three, I can't remember their airtime. How many proposed LNG, natural gas pipelines to the coast are there so far? I think it's 3 lines and maybe 5 or 6 LNG plants or something like that, and growing.
About ready, huh? For BC.
What's that?
For BC.
Yeah, in British Columbia. Well, there's a lot of resistance to all this. I call this, what I've presented to you, basically the assault of the fossil fuel industry on the environment and on human society. And there is resistance to this that is significant. We know how difficult Northern Gateway is having here in British Columbia, but this is in New Brunswick. For some years now, people in New Brunswick have been up in arms about the fracking that the natural gas industry would like to do in that province. And surprise, surprise, who's behind the fracking desires in New Brunswick? The Irving family. Although the name doesn't appear in the publicity about it, they hired a U.S. company to actually come and do the exploratory seismic work. But you're familiar with this protest earlier this month of the Elsie Booktook First Nations people. These are Mi'kmaq people in New Brunswick who stood up against a police assault on a weeks-long sort of blockade protest that they had against the seismic company that was going out finding where the best sources of natural gas to frack might be in the interest of the Irving Empire. So on October 17th, responding to a court injunction, the RCMP assaulted this peaceful protest. I call it a protest blockade that was occurring. And it was a violent assault by the RCMP. The people in camouflage are the elite units of the RCMP with, as you can see, very high-powered weapons. I actually was arrested in northern Alberta at a blockade at the time against Petro-Canada that was coming on to contested Indigenous territory in northern Alberta at the Rubicon Lake. And I saw exactly this. When they come in to raid a peaceful protest, snipers all around the perimeter, just in case what? I don't know. Who knows what goes on in their heads. Luckily, no one died. But it was just north of Moncton, this area where the protest that I showed you took place. So that's certainly one of the sharpest, which incidentally won a victory. The company that was doing the exploratory work has had to put a halt to operations. Of course, it hasn't resolved the issue, but they won quite an important political, even a court victory, the Elsipogtog First Nation. This is one of the things that's coming our way, and that is new to the whole story, which is oil by rail. There's been a lot of oil by rail already, but it really took off in the year 2010. And so this, especially in the United States, but it's coming on big in Canada as well. And you're familiar with one of the chapters in this story, which is the disaster in Lac La Vantique, pictured here, which 47 people died. This is the most recent oil train derailment just west of Edmonton. It's the date on that, about 10 days ago. It's either a week or 2 weeks ago, I'm sorry, a week ago. Just outside, about 85 kilometers west of Edmonton. This was 9 cars. These are filled with propane. And 3 of them exploded and burned, and the other 6, basically they had to they blew them up to burn them off because they couldn't, you can't put out a fire like this. There's a little bit of what it looked like from afar. So here's a house. If you read my article on the subject, you'll read an interview with the people that lived in this house. So look at this little burn here. So they escaped with their lives. And then the people that were living in the little village here and some of the outlying, they were all evacuated. It was a total emergency. But that's just the latest of the 2. There were 2 oil train derailments right in the very center in Calgary. Roughly, say, geographically in Vancouver, equivalent where the Home Depot sits in the False Creek Flats. I mean, right in the center of the city. So this was 6 cars that derailed in August in a CP rail yard. And this was in June during the floods this is the Boningbrook Bridge, which is 100 years old. It's a CP rail bridge. It goes over the Bow River here. Again, within a stone's throw of downtown Calgary, and that was what happened. The bridge basically buckled under the weight of the oil train cars. Luckily, no explosions, no oil leaks, and so on. But so I've shown you 4 big derailments in the past, 3 months? Not bad. How many more are coming as oil by rail expands? And this is the people in Calgary who, as they saw and learned about the increased oil train expansion, took matters into their hands and protested to begin to have some community control over what's rolling through their neighborhoods on these rail lines. Now this is the craziest oil by train proposal of all. Well, no, maybe Lac La Vantique was the craziest. This one really rivals it. This is a company in the U.S. that wants to run oil trains along the old CN rail route. It's called Omnitracks, the company. They bought this line from CN a couple decades ago. The CN didn't want to run it anymore. So this is used for grain right now, this line. 1,500 kilometers long. They want to run oil by rail up to here, put it on ships and run it through subarctic waters. This rail line runs basically over peat bogs, and under the peat, I think it's 3 or 4 feet, maybe a bit deeper, is permafrost. And so there's some stability there. Well, permafrost, what's happening to permafrost in the era of global warming? The permafrost is degrading. So they're going to run these heavy-duty oil trains. You saw what they did to the Boningbrook Bridge over this rail line on permafrost that's degrading. So what happens to rail lines when the ground? So we'll see. This is, again, very hotly contested, but I think this is an example of how crazy, literally, are the people that would do this. This was my favorite placard at the rally last Sunday in New Westminster. And again, the small victory scored there. Most of you may know that Surrey City Council said, no, we're not going to accept the Surrey Docks whole proposal. It's the future of the earth that we're talking about fighting over here. And so we have long and difficult struggles ahead of us in which the First Nations people will play a very important role. Because basically all of these proposals that you see before you, and even the existing ones, are fundamental violations of the right of the First Nations people to sovereignty, to decide whether or not they want this to happen. So that's the first thing. And secondly, they're a threat to all of society, and all of us have an interest in getting involved. And the movement is growing. This is the big reconciliation walk that took place in Vancouver earlier this month. I'll leave it there.